as I said, I will start by answering some questions that I've already received by email. I'll be answering them. I'll answer as many as possible in the first hour or so. And then we'll have another 10 minutes silence. And then I'll answer any questions if people want to, if anyone wants to raise their hand to ask a question. The first question I received by email is from a friend called Lars. He says, "My name is Lars and I live in Sweden. I have, during almost all my life, been searching for a guru who could help me on the path to self-realization. I felt from a very young age that something were missing in my life. At first, I did not know what that was. After I learned to meditate, something very amazing occurred. One day when I woke up in the morning, everything suddenly looked different. I felt completely calm for the first time, and all colors and sounds were very clear. My ego was gone, and the only thing that remained was love. I didn't care a thing about myself, and I was only concerned about the well-being of other species. It was no effort involved in anything I did, but everything seemed to happen automatically. For the first time in my life, I knew that this was the real me. Unfortunately, this state only lasted for about 3 months, and then one day it was completely gone. I got frustrated and tried to regain this state again, but it never came back. Since then, I have meditated regularly and also read and listened to talks with you and David Godman about Sri Ramana Maharshi. I hope you can answer one question I have. What I understand was Sri Ramana Maharshi was able to transmit his energy to other people and give them self-realization in an instant. What I would like to ask you is if you know about a now living guru that is able to do the same thing as Sri Ramana Maharshi did. So that was the question I was asked. I know about only one now living guru, and that is Bhagavan, Sri Ramana Maharshi himself. If we think he is a dead guru, we haven't understood what guru actually is. Guru is what is eternally living. Guru is ever living in our heart as I. Guru is our own fundamental awareness of our own existence, that which is always shining in our heart as I. Guru is pure awareness. Guru is infinite love. That is what manifested in the human form of Sri Ramana Maharshi. But though the human form may not be living, what manifested in that form is eternally living and is ever available to us. Since Guru is always living, why is it necessary for it to appear outwardly in human form? Because our attention is turned outwards, it's necessary for Guru to appear in human form in order to teach us that what we are seeking, the happiness we are all seeking, is our own real nature, and therefore it can be found only within ourselves. And thereby the Guru turns our attention back within. That is the function of Guru. If you go to any living person, they cannot do anything more than tell you to turn within, which is what Bhagavan has already told us. So if you understand Bhagavan's teachings, there is no need for any other guru. The outward guru is not the true form of a guru. The true form of a guru is what is shining in us as I. So the guru will always turn our attention back towards ourselves. The true guru will not say, "Come to me, I will transmit something to you and save you." The true guru will say, "You yourself are already that. Turn within, find out what you really are." That is the function of Guru. Regarding what you said in the sentence before that you understand that Ramana Maharshi was able to transmit his energy to other people and give them self-realization in an instant. Bhagavan said, self-realization is not something that can be given, because what we are seeking is always ours. We are always aware of ourselves as I am, but there's nothing more to know than I am. But the problem is now we know more than I am. We don't know ourselves just as I am, but as I am a person. I am Lars, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. That knowledge superimposed on I am is what we need to get rid of. In other words, we need to get rid of our false identification. We need to give up the identification, I am a person. I am this particular person, or whatever. If we give up that, what remains is the state of pure self-awareness, which is what some people call self-realization. So that is not something that can be given. We can, metaphorically, we can say Bhagavan gives it to us by turning our attention back within to see that it is always ours, but he's not actually giving it. Bhagavan also doesn't transmit anything, because for him, he doesn't see anything as other than himself. So there is no person or thing to which he could transmit his energy. He is the one infinite whole. So there is no transmission of any sort. What is required in the spiritual path is not transmission, but submission. Submission means surrender. We who have risen as ego must surrender ourselves and thereby subside back into the source from which we have risen, which is the pure awareness I am. So anyone who talks about transmission has not understood the real nature of grace. The real nature of grace can be experienced only when we subside, when we submit ourselves, when we surrender and merge back into the source from which we have risen. Grace is nothing but the love that Bhagavan has for us as himself. Because Bhagavan doesn't see us as other than himself, he doesn't love us as anything other than himself. He loves us as himself. So that is the real nature of grace. There's one other point I'd like to clarify in what you had written earlier. You wrote about an experience you had in which you woke up in the morning, everything looked different. I felt completely calm for the first time, and all colors and sounds were very clear. My ego was gone, you say. When you say my ego, whose ego was gone? Who is the me who says my ego was gone? Who is the me who says, or who is the I who says, I felt completely calm? That I is ego. The state in which ego has gone, there'll be no one left to say, my ego has gone. And you also described the experience as you were able to see sounds and colors all colors and sounds were very clear, you say. And you talk about the well-being of other species. That which is aware of anything other than itself is ego. So long as we are aware of otherness, so long as we are aware of multiplicity, ego is there as the subject, that which is aware of these things. So the state in which ego has gone is the state of pure awareness in which there is nothing other than ourselves. There's nothing other than pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness but is not aware of anything other than itself. That is the state of egolessness. So long as we are aware of multiplicity, that which is aware of all this multiplicity is ego. So, and any state that comes will inevitably go. What we are seeking is not some new experience, something that will come, because as Bhagavan often used to say, whatever comes has to go. So if we attain any experience, but we haven't had before, just as it has come, it will surely go. What we are seeking is that which is ever present. What is ever present is only the fundamental awareness I am. That is what we are seeking. That cannot be given by anyone. It cannot be transmitted by anyone. We have to turn within and surrender ourselves completely, thereby subside back into that and remain as that. It is not something to be acquired, but something to be, we should just remain as that, not rise as ego. So I hope that answers your question. Looking for a living guru means a person outside. I mean, what people mean when they talk about a living guru, they mean a living person. Any guru who is a person is something outside ourselves. The true guru is there only to tell us what you are seeking is not outside of you, it's inside you. So we have to give up seeking the guru outside. We have to seek the true guru who is ever shining in our heart as I. That is what Bhagavan taught us. The next question I received is from Mary Jo. She asked, every night we go to sleep, the ego subsides and we experience pure awareness. Do we experience this in every lifetime on a regular basis? That's the first question, so I'll answer that first. There is never a moment when we do not experience pure self-awareness. Pure self-awareness is what is shining in us as I am. Throughout our three states, waking, dream, and sleep, we're always aware of ourselves as I am. So we are always experiencing pure awareness. However, in waking and dream, though we're experiencing pure awareness, we are not experiencing it in its purity because we are experiencing it mixed with adjuncts. That is, instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, or I am I, as Bhagavan sometimes used to say, we are aware of ourselves as I am this or I am that. I am this person. I am Sue, I'm Mary Jo, or I am Michael, or whoever. The I am, in that false awareness, I am Mary Jo, the I am is the pure self-awareness. So all we have to do is to remove all the adjuncts, all the things that we identify ourselves with, we have to remove those, and what remains is pure self-awareness. How to remove all the adjuncts? So long as we turn our attention outwards, we are holding on to the adjuncts. When we turn our attention back towards ourself and try and hold on to ourself alone, that's hold on only to I am, the adjuncts will drop off by themselves. So that is the practice of self-investigation and self-surrender that Bhagavan taught us. So that pure self-awareness is what is ever present. There is never a moment in this lifetime or any other lifetime when we are not aware of pure self-awareness, when we are anything other than pure self-awareness. We maybe seem to be something other than that, but we are always only that. That is our reality. That is what we actually are, even here and now. The second question Mary Jo asked is, insomniacs versus those who sleep well, dream little. The one that sleeps well experiences longer periods of pure self-awareness. The ego isn't present. Is it due to karma that some experience the sleep state more? Do our sleeping patterns indicate anything about our ego? What does Bhagavan say about the importance of sleep? We all sleep, even insomniacs sleep. They may have difficulty falling asleep, but we couldn't survive without sleep, because when we rise as ego in waking or dream, it takes a lot of energy to rise as ego, to project this body and world and to experience all these things. It requires a lot of energy. Our energy is limited, so after some hours of in waking or dream, we become tired. We need to return to sleep in order to, metaphorically speaking, recharge our batteries, because the source of all energy is our own real nature, which is pure self-awareness. Regarding the idea that people who sleep well enjoy a longer period of pure self-awareness than those who don't sleep so well, time is relative to the state in which we are now present. In waking, we experience a certain measure of time. In dream, we experience another measure of time. For example, sometimes we may doze off to sleep for just a few moments, but in that few moments, we experience what seems to be a long dream. Many things seem to happen. So every state has its own standard or its own time scale. So we cannot compare the time scale of one state with the time scale of another state. Moreover, time exists, or time seems to exist, only in waking and dream. In sleep, there is no time. It's only from the waking perspective of waking state. We wake up in the morning and say, oh, I had a good sleep. I slept for 8 hours. Or I had a very disturbed night's sleep. I must have slept only for an hour or two in all. That's all from the perspective of our waking state. But we try to measure the time we were asleep. But when we are actually asleep, not dreaming, that is, when we are actually asleep, there is no time at all. Time is just time is the dimension in which change occurs. In sleep, there is no change, therefore there is no time. Sleep is a state of pure awareness. So do our sleeping patterns indicate anything about our ego? No, our sleeping patterns is all according to destiny. It has nothing to do with, it doesn't indicate anything, except that our destiny happens to be such. Sometimes we may be destined to get a good night's sleep. Some days our sleep may be disturbed. That's all according to destiny. So it doesn't really indicate anything of any significance. Regarding what does Bhagavan say about the importance of sleep? Obviously, sleep is necessary. We all need to sleep in order to regain energy. But Bhagavan didn't encourage us to sleep. If we're tired, we should sleep. Once we wake up from sleep refreshed, we go about our day-to-day activities. So sleep has a necessary function. But Bhagavan did say what we experience in sleep is nothing but pure awareness. However, from the perspective of our mind in waking and dream, what we experience in sleep seems to be a temporary state. It's only it's not a temporary state from the perspective of our real nature, which is pure awareness, but it's temporary from the perspective of mind in waking and dream, because it seems to us now that sleep has come to an end. Even though sleep, the state of pure awareness is actually our eternal state, it seems when we rise as ego in waking or dream, but sleep has come to an end. What we are seeking is not a temporary sleep, but the eternal sleep of pure awareness. In order to experience that, we need to cease rising as ego. In order to cease rising as ego, we need to turn our attention back within to investigate who am I, and thereby to surrender ourselves. When we surrender ourselves completely, that is when ego completely subsides and merges back into its source, what remains is only its source, which is pure awareness. So that is the state of eternal sleep. Even now we are in that state of eternal sleep, but because we've risen as ego, we seem to be unaware of the sleep that we are in even now. So in order to experience the eternal sleep, which is our own real nature, we need to turn back within and investigate ourselves. I hope that adequately answers those two questions. The next set of questions are from Kartik. He says, I would like to ask the following questions for clarification on the practice of self-inquiry. 1. From my understanding of the teaching, self-inquiry means remaining without thoughts, and that's what I'm currently practicing at the moment. However, I feel that the stillness of mind is more subtle than thoughtless meditation, and probably self-inquiry is even more subtle than the stillness of mind. It would be very helpful if Michael can give clarification regarding the subtleties of the self-inquiry practice in a practical sense. Thoughtless meditation, within brackets no thought, equals stillness of mind equals self-inquiry. Is the above understanding correct, or is there any subtle differences? Being in a state free of thought is not self-inquiry. In sleep, we're in a state free of thought, but that is not self-inquiry. Self-inquiry means, as Bhagavan said, Bhagavan defines what he means by the term Atma-vichara in the 16th paragraph of Nana. What he says there is, Kartik, from your name, I assume you're a Tamilian, so you probably understand this. Sada kalamum manate atmavil vetirubhatakutan Atma-vicharam enjupaya. What that means is the name Atma-vichara refers only to the practice of always keeping the mind in or on Atma, oneself. That means keeping the mind on Atma means keeping our attention on ourself, turning our attention back within to face ourself alone. That alone is Atma-vichara. Thoughts, we shouldn't be concerned about thoughts. Thoughts arise when our attention is turned outwards. Thoughts naturally arise. If we turn our attention back towards ourselves, thoughts cannot rise. If any thought arises, that means our attention has gone away from ourselves towards that thought, because no thought can rise without our attending to it. So in this 6th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, Etene enengul erinum enna. That means however many thoughts rise, what does it matter? Or it doesn't actually literally mean however many thoughts rise, what? That means so what, or what does it matter? So Bhagavan isn't concerned about thoughts. Bhagavan asks us, so long as we are concerned about thoughts, our attention is on something other than ourselves. Bhagavan says, ignore thoughts, attend only to yourself. If we attend to ourselves, the thoughts will automatically subside. That's why he goes on to say in that paragraph, as soon as each thought appears, if one vigilantly investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. If one thus investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. Its birthplace means the place from which we've risen as ego. That means the pure awareness, our own real nature, which is pure awareness. And then he says, the thought that had risen will also cease. Why will the thought cease? It is because thoughts can exist only so long as we attend to them. If we attend only to ourselves, no thought will be able to arise. So we shouldn't be concerned about thoughts. We should only be concerned about being self-attentive, attending only to ourselves. That alone is self-investigation. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent, other thoughts will subside. If we were able to attend to ourselves alone, that is to withdraw our attention entirely from all other things and fix it on ourselves alone, there would be no room for any thoughts to rise, and what would remain would be just pure awareness. But in practice, we are never focusing our attention entirely on ourselves. To put it metaphorically, so long as we're aware of thoughts, world, phenomena, we are facing outwards. We need to turn back, to put it in metaphorical terms, we need to turn back 180 degrees, back to face ourselves alone. During practice, we are somewhere between 0 and 180 degrees turned back towards ourselves. That is, well, if we're 0 degrees turned back, we're just facing the world. That's not self-inquiry. But when we begin to investigate ourselves, we are trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves. We may be able to only partially withdraw our attention from other things to attend to ourselves. So that's the equivalent of maybe 10-degree turn or 20-degree turn. As we go deeper and deeper in the practice, our attention is being more and more withdrawn from other things by being fixed firmly on ourselves. So that is we're getting closer to 180 degrees. Bhagavan in verse 16 of Upadeshundiya, Bhagavan describes the practice very clearly and beautifully. He says, Veli vidayangale vittu manam tan oli uru odale undipara unme unachiam undipara. What that means is, Veli vidayangale vittu, leaving external phenomena. All external phenomena, according to Bhagavan, are thoughts. What does he mean by external phenomena? Well, according to Bhagavan, all phenomena are external to ourselves. Because they are external in the sense that they are other than ourselves. So what he refers to as Veli Vidayangal is anything other than ourselves. And according to him, everything other than ourselves is just a thought. So leaving external phenomena means leaving thoughts or leaving all perceptions, leaving everything other than ourselves. But that's an adverbial clause. The main subject is manam tan oli uru ordale. That means the mind knowing its own form of light alone, unme unachi. That alone is real knowledge. So what we have to do, we have to turn our attention. What he means here by oli uru, tan oli uru, its own form of light, is our form of pure, is the light of pure awareness. So we have to turn our attention away from all phenomena back towards the light of awareness. To the extent that we turn our attention back towards ourselves, to that extent we are automatically leaving external phenomena. But merely leaving external phenomena is not self-inquiry, because every night when we fall asleep, we leave external phenomena. We cease thinking anything. But we don't thereby know what we actually are. Because ego just subsides and it again rises when after getting sufficient rest. So, but the emphasis in this verse 16 is on the subject is manam tan oli uru ordale, the mind knowing its own form of light. That alone is real awareness. If we know only our own form of light, then automatically we are thereby leaving external phenomena. So what is required is that we turn our attention back towards ourselves, unconcerned about thoughts. Because if we are turning our attention back towards ourselves, we are automatically withdrawing our attention from all thoughts. So we need not. If we try to make the mind still or to stop thinking, that itself is a thought. That effort to stop thinking is itself a thought. And who is making that effort? It is ego. Ego, according to Bhagavan, that is the first thought and root of all other thoughts. So by trying to stop thoughts, we cannot stop thoughts. If we want to stop thoughts, we need to turn our attention and back to face ourselves alone. So that is the practice of self-investigation as taught by Bhagavan. That's what he means in that sentence that I read from the 16th paragraph of Nana. Keeping the mind always fixed in oneself, that alone is Atma-vichara. Keeping the mind fixed in oneself means keeping one's attention on oneself. In the second question asked by Kartik is, what does effortless state of self-abidance mean? At what stage a practitioner transitions from making an effort to effortless practice? How long one has to practice to reach that state in practice? If it's effortless, that is, so long as practice is necessary, so long as we rise as ego. So long as we rise as ego, turning our attention back towards ourselves requires effort, because the nature of ego is to always grasp other things. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Uru patri undam, uru patri nekum, uru patri undu mika ongum. That means grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. It here means what as he says later in that verse, Uru Vatrapeya Hande. That is the formless phantom ego. That is, ego is nothing but a formless phantom, but comes into existence grasping form, but stands, that endures by grasping form, and that by grasping and feeding on form flourishes. So the very form here means any phenomena, anything other than ourself. The ego is formless, it has no form of its own, but it cannot exist without grasping a form. That is, the first form it grasps is the form of a body, which is aware of as I, and then through the five senses of that body, it grasps all the forms of this world. Grasping here means it grasps in its attention. So, because the nature of ego is to always be grasping form, to turn our attention back within, to grasp ourself alone, requires effort, because we're going against the natural flow of the mind. But when ego it finally merges back in its source, what remains is the effortless state of pure awareness, which is our real nature. So effortlessness, we will experience effortlessness only when we have ceased rising as ego. But however, if we are following this practice correctly, the more we are holding on to ourselves, the more automatically other things are dropping down. So, and as our love to be self-attentive increases, it will seem less effortful. That is, because of our great love to just to be as we actually are, that will make the effort seem sometimes almost effortless. But actually, effort is required so long as we rise as ego. Only when ego emerges forever back into its source will all effort come to an end. Effort is the very nature of ego. Usually as ego, we are making effort to hold on to other things. So now we have to change the direction of our effort away from other things back towards ourselves. We need to hold ourselves alone and thereby let go of everything else. That is the nature of the practice of self-investigation and self-surrender as taught by Bhagavan. And then the third question Kartik asks is, Bhagavan has said in talk section 313, page 284, that one can do self-inquiry even in the midst of worldly life while performing activities. I find it very hard to comprehend it. How can the mind be both still and active at the same time? Mind activity is essential for performing any activity, and if there's any activity, then it cannot be considered to be stillness of mind. Can you shed some light on the seeming contradicting statement? It is not contradictory at all what Bhagavan says. The activity, whatever is to go on in our outward life, that is, all the events of our outward life are determined by prarabdha, by destiny. They will happen automatically. In order for us to undergo the destiny, certain actions of body, speech, and mind are required. For example, supposing it's your destiny to be, say, a doctor. In order to become a doctor, you have to study, you have to pass exams, and then only you will become a doctor. And in order to practice as a doctor, you need to be seeing patients and assessing their condition and everything. All these actions, your body, speech, and mind will be made to do because it's your destiny to be a doctor and to work as a doctor. You need not be concerned about these things. The only thing we need be concerned about is attending to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, whatever actions the body, speech, and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do by prarabdha. As Bhagavan said in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother, avarava prarabdha prakaram adakarnavan angangirundu atuvipan. That literally means avarava prarabdha prakaram. That means according to their prarabdha. That means the prarabdha of each person. Adakarnavan, he who is for that, angangirundu, being there means, in this context, means in the heart of each one of them, in every place, or in the heart of each one of them. Atavipan, he will make them dance. That is, whatever actions our body, speech, and mind are destined to do, they will be made to do. So we need not concern ourselves about that. Then he says in the next sentence, Endrum naduvadadu, enwichikanum naduvadu. What will not happen, however much, what is never to happen will not happen, however much effort we make. Nadapadu entadesenum niladu. What is to happen will not stop, however much one tries to obstruct it. Iduvetinum, this is certain. Ahalin monamayirake nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What he means by being silent is not that the body, speech, and mind shouldn't be active, because they'll be made to act according to prarabdha. What he means is that inwardly we should be silent. That is, we shouldn't rise as ego to try to make effort for what is not going to happen, or to obstruct what is going to happen. We need to just turn within and surrender ourselves completely. Bhagavan describes this very clearly in the 13th paragraph of Nana. He says, well, he starts by defining what is surrender. Anmachintane tavira, verichintane kalambavitku satram idam kadamo. That is, not giving the slightest room to rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana means self-attentiveness. Atma-nishta paranai irupte, thereby being Atma-nishta paran. Atma-nishta paran means one who's firmly established as oneself. Tanne isanaku alipadam. That alone is giving oneself to God. So just by clinging firmly to Atma-chintana, to self-attentiveness, and thereby giving not even the slightest room to the rising of any other thought, that is giving ourselves to God. That is true surrender. And then he says, so there he said how we need to give no room to the rising of any other thought. But then he goes on to explain why we need not give room to the rising of any other thought. That doesn't mean that the body and speech and mind shouldn't do what they're destined to do. They will do that anyway. Inwardly, we should not be giving room to the rising of any thought. Why? Because he says, even though one places whatever amount of burden on God, that entire amount he will bear. So we leave the burden of what the body, speech, and mind should do. They're going to be made to do according to prarabdha, so we leave that entire burden to him. We need not be concerned about that. Since one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas means whatever needs to be done, whatever ought to be done, or whatever ought to happen. So the one Parameshwara Shakti, that the one power of God, supreme ruling power, is making all these things happen. Instead of we also yielding to it, why to be perpetually thinking it's necessary to do like that, do like this, it's necessary to do like that. So even about what we should do, we can leave that burden entirely to God. Though we know the train is bearing all the burdens, why should we who go traveling in it, instead of remaining happily, leaving our small luggage placed on the train, suffer by bearing our luggage, on our head? So we can, if we have enough, if we are willing to let go entirely, if we're willing to surrender entirely, we can be firmly fixed, we can be clinging firmly to Atma-chintana, and all the other activities will go on automatically according to destiny. So what Bhagavan says there, it is possible. But obviously, in order to do so, we must be willing to surrender ourselves. Most of us are not yet sufficiently willing to surrender ourselves. So it seems to us, I have to do this, I have to do that. And so we are not yet willing to leave that burden to God. But to the extent that we are willing to leave the burden to God and to cling firmly only to Atma-chintana, to self-investigation or self-attentiveness, to that extent it is possible to be self-attentive even in the midst of any amount of activity. But obviously, when we start off on this path, we don't have we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves sufficiently. So it seems to us to be easier to be self-attentive when we feel we don't have other work to do. So it's useful at first to set aside some time to try and be self-attentive. That doesn't mean that we have to necessarily sit in meditation or whatever, but whenever we have spare moments during the course of the day, whenever our attention is not on any urgently on any other thing, we can be trying to attend to ourselves. For example, when going about our day-to-day activities, walking or going by bus or whatever to work or whatever it is, there's lots of times when our mind need not be engaged in any thoughts. At such times we can be attending to ourselves. The more we go deep into this practice, the more we will come to understand, but it's actually never necessary for us to be attending to thoughts. We only need to attend to ourselves. So it is certainly possible to carry on being self-attentive in the midst of any amount of worldly activity, but it requires a certain strength of practice, which will come by patient and persistent practice. So Bhagavan has shown us the way, we have to follow the way, then it will unfold as we proceed. So I hope that it answers your questions adequately, Kartik. The next question is from Ernest. What he says is, at the moment it's clear that only genuine self-investigation and surrender is the ultimate way to be taken, and no direct answers can be given by a person, be it you, Sadhu Om, Major Chadwick, and Annamalai Swami, the direct followers of Ramana, or any other what seemingly reliable source. What I do find a little confusing is the food and drinks Ramana would like me to be consuming. For example, I'm a flexitarian, eating mostly vegetarian at the moment, since I do not feel repulsion from eating meat and fish. The smell of it doesn't make me sick, or may even make me salivate, but I often feel like crying when I imagine the suffering of the animals. I will avoid meat in general, but I might eat a piece or two if the meat is given with kindness when I'm a guest. Similarly with eggs, alcohol, caffeine. What's interesting is that at moments like these, I find myself less proud spiritually or less holier than thou. What my body cannot tolerate is eating onions and garlic. Why have you never mentioned them as non-sattvic foods? What about other things named as non-sattvic in literature? Like refined sugar, mushrooms, yeast, tomatoes, radish, caffeinated drinks, and so on. While Annamalai Swami was called Onion Swami because he used to eat onions a lot, N.R. Narayana Iyer writes, eggs, meat, and vegetables like onions, garlic, and radish, etc., and sleep-inducing drinks should be avoided totally. And then he goes on to ask, how important is diet for self-investigation? It's so confusing. Have I missed anything? What would Ramana in person would likely have said about that? Can I ever be tipsy like a Christian after drinking wine, or energetic like a Buddhist after drinking tea? Or shall I share a meal with meat eaters and dare to call myself a true devotee? Or should I better just tell everyone I'm on a diet and avoid non-sattvic food and drinks, even if my body would die from starvation or dehydration, if I happen to be trapped in a life-threatening situation where nothing but non-sattvic choice is available? Thank you in advance. The abundance of contradicting sources on what is to be considered sattvic food is what makes this aspect of practice difficult. Let it be simple and clear. What Bhagavan says about this in Nana is very simple, but it's it's open to interpretation, one term. That is, what he says is, by mita sattvika ahara niyama, that means the restriction of consuming only sattva conducive food in moderate quantities, which is the best among all restrictions, the sattva guna, the quality of beingness, calmness, and clarity of the mind increasing, for self-investigation, help will thereby arise. So, according to Bhagavan, if we consume mita sattvika ahara, that is moderate quantities of sattvic food, that is the best among all restrictions, because by doing so, the sattva guna of the mind will increase, and thereby it will help us in our self-investigation. So your question really is, what is meant by mita sattvika ahara? Well, mita means moderate, measured or moderate. It implies moderate quantities. In other words, not overeating. Sattvika means what is conducive to sattva. And ahara, it generally is taken to mean food, but it can also be interpreted in a broader sense, because ahara means what is taken, meaning what is taken within. So it can also apply to what we take in through the five senses. So if you have a liking to watch violent movies or something, that is not sattvika ahara. Watching violent movies will affect the mind and bring out the non-sattvic tendencies of the mind. So we can interpret this in a broader sense than just food, but it also includes food, and food obviously is important. What is meant by sattvika ahara, as you say, it's interpreted differently by different people. But the most important criteria, I believe, is ahimsa. Ahimsa means not harming. Whatever food we consume should have been produced without causing harm to any living beings. So obviously, meat, eggs, and such things are obviously out. Bhagavan made it very clear when people asked him. He said, eating meat or eggs or anything like that is definitely against, is definitely not sattvic, and it's against the whole spirit of the spiritual path. That is causing harm to others just for our own. Because we relish eating such things is totally unjustified. Some people, particularly in yoga, they do far more research on these things, and they say even some vegetables like onions, garlic, radish, and these other vegetables you mentioned are not sattvic. Bhagavan didn't attach much importance to that. Bhagavan used to cook onions and garlic in the ashram. Though Orthodox Brahmins consider onions and garlic to be very wrong, Bhagavan, by his example, he showed he didn't think we had to attach so much importance to these things. That is as I say, my interpretation is, but what is most important is ahimsa. That is. It's the ethical criteria is the most important criteria. If we are eating food which has been produced by causing harm, by causing death to other creatures, that cannot be sattvic. That would definitely non-sattvic. About foods like onions and garlic, if you don't relish them, if they don't agree with you, by all means give them up. There's no hard and fast rule that you should eat onions and garlic or you shouldn't. But obviously, we each have to find out for ourselves what type of foods are conducive to a sattvic state of mind. Some people find onions and garlic disturb them. Many of us, it really doesn't make any difference. I think yogis attach a lot of importance to these things because their path is slightly different. They are trying to forcibly control the mind, whereas the path of self-investigation is it's a true path of bhakti. It is the path of surrender and bhakti. So in this, we are not trying to control the mind by force. We are, by love, we are trying to turn our attention back within. So from the example Bhagavan set, I don't think we have to be concerned about onions and garlic. But if you find your body cannot tolerate it, then fine, avoid it. I mean, that's good. Regarding what you say about, but if you eat meat, you find you're less proud spiritually and less holier than thou. Feeling holier than thou, or feeling spiritually proud, whatever that means, these are all the way to control these things is not by avoiding eating. I mean, but not by eating meat. We need to keep a check on the ego by turning our attention within. If we are truly following the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, there'll be no room for feelings of pride or feeling holier than thou. Yes, we don't eat meat, other people do eat meat. That doesn't mean we're better than them. We have been blessed with the clarity to understand that eating meat is causing harm to other creatures. Some people, it just doesn't strike their mind. So we, rather than feeling holier than them, we just feel they haven't yet been given that grace. We have been fortunate, we've been given the grace to understand eating meat is, under any circumstance, eating meat is bad. Okay, Ben, you talk about a life-threatening situation. If you were living with Eskimos in the Arctic or something, and you had no other choice, then maybe it would be justified to consider eating the diet they eat, which is a meat-based diet. But most of us are not in that situation. We live in a society where plenty of fruits, vegetables, and other plant foods are available. So we have no excuse for not eating a plant-based diet. The other thing that is generally considered sattvic, traditionally considered sattvic, is milk and milk products. Even Bhagavan drank milk and had milk in coffee and drank buttermilk and so on. But that is because in those days, cows were treated very differently to how they were treated, how they're treated now. In the ashram, in Bhagavan's days, and even now, they keep cows and they treat them with extreme kindness, and they're not exploiting them. They only take a limited amount of milk, which they use for puja and so on. That is justified. But the way 99.999% of milk that is produced nowadays is produced on an industrial scale, and the dairy industry involves a huge amount of cruelty. So I think I believe it goes against the principle of ahimsa, and therefore drinking milk that has been produced in such a way is definitely not sattvic. So it does depend upon conditions and the circumstances, but what I think the main criteria we have to consider is, has this food been produced causing harm to any living being? If it has, then it's not sattvic. If it hasn't, then it may be sattvic. Regarding among the plant foods, obviously not all plant foods are sattvic. A lot of drugs, cocaine is a plant, it comes from plants, but it's not obviously not sattvic. So I mean, just because a food is a plant food doesn't necessarily mean it's sattvic, but generally most of the plant food that we consume as food rather than as drugs, most of them are more or less sattvic. So I don't think we have to be too picky about plant food unless we find any particular food. If you find onions or garlic or radish or anything else is not conducive, then just don't take it. A lot of people take tea and coffee. The very strict yogis would say, oh, that's not sattvic. I personally don't drink tea or coffee because it doesn't particularly appeal to me, but I don't think it's, and because I never drink tea or coffee, if I very rarely am given tea and drink tea, I will notice the effect it has on my mind. It'll make me slightly lightheaded because I'm not used to it. But I don't think it's as I say, even Bhagavan drank tea and coffee in the ashram, and so I don't think these are a seriously non-sattvic food. Another thing people say is very pungent food with a lot of chilies in is non-sattvic. But again, it's a matter of, that's where Bhagavan, the term metta comes in, that is moderation. Taking chilies and so on in moderate quantities is maybe good for the health. Taking in excessive quantities is maybe not good for either the body or the mind. But we have to, all Bhagavan said is mita sattvika ahara niyama. We have to interpret this according to our own understanding. So I've given my view. Obviously, there'll be other people who have other views, but you have to decide for yourself what you consider sattvic. But as I say, taking meat or fish, even if it is to please someone who has offered it with kindness, is definitely not sattvic. And as you say, you can simply politely say you're on a diet or and avoid such things. I mean, and nowadays there are so many people are vegetarian and vegan. It's very rare nowadays to find people taking offense just because you say, oh, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, so I don't take. People generally nowadays are understanding, so you don't have to think that you're offending people by declining to eat meat or fish. So I hope that's of some use to you, Ernest. But as I say, you have to use your judgment in these things. We all have to, all teachings are open to interpretation. We have to understand them. We have to, according to our level of understanding. The next is a question from Baba. What he has written is, I've been trying for 40 years to quiet my mind and be open to the teachings of our teachers. I had this dark thought that has been with me, and I wanted to hear your opinion. What if love and compassion are just there for us to propagate and continue the species? What if we are programmed down to the point that even love and compassion is there as an evolutionary tool and not a spiritual tool? This thought upsets me because it reduces me or us down to just the happenstance of the miracle of life, which is still a miracle, but it has no purpose and meaning besides this unconscious programming to procreate and continue the species. One can say that compassion and love without procreating has no evolutionary benefit, but you do not have to rear children in that sense. The fact that we can be present for other beings allows the programming of nature to continue. Is our life nothing more than being programmed by nature? And is spirituality something that has evolved because it benefits species survival? Is the universe truly indifferent to our existence? Babak, all these ideas are ideas that can occur to us if we believe in what is called materialism or physicalism. If we think the sole reality is, but everything is just material, like a lot of scientists nowadays, they believe even consciousness is a product of the brain. And if consciousness is a product of the brain, so is love and compassion and everything else. But we don't have to believe like this. Bhagavan has, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, we can understand the absurdity of that type of view. What do we experience first? The basis of all experience is consciousness. So to say that consciousness is a product of physical evolution is obviously absurd. We are aware of we are aware of the appearance of a physical world only because we are conscious. So we cannot doubt consciousness. We can doubt the existence of a material world, because this material world that we now experience could be no more than a dream. That's perfectly reasonable to doubt whether this is anything more than a dream. But to believe that consciousness is just an illusion, as some modern philosophers try to argue, it's absurd. Bhagavan has given us strong reasons to understand that our real nature is consciousness and not anything physical. Now, as ego, we are aware of ourselves as I am this body. This body is what we seem to be. But if this body were what we actually are, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of this body. But when we're dreaming, we're aware of ourselves, but we're not aware of this body. We're aware of some other body as if it were ourselves. So since we are then aware of ourselves without being aware of this body, and since we're now aware of ourselves without being aware of that dream body, neither of these bodies can be ourselves. But then our evil mind, in sleep, we're aware of ourselves without being aware of either body or mind. So neither body nor mind can be what we actually are. What we actually are is what remains in sleep, which is just the fundamental awareness of our own existence. I am. That is what is real. That is what we actually are. So love and compassion arise out of awareness. Without awareness, there would be no love and compassion. So, as Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nana, what we all love is happiness. That is the implication. That is what he says in this paragraph is, since all sentient beings want or like to be always happy without what is called misery, since for everyone the greatest love is only for ourselves, that is, we all naturally love ourselves, and since happiness alone is the cause of love, that is, we love those things that make us happy, so happiness alone is the cause of love. In order to obtain that happiness, which is one's own nature, which one experiences daily in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of mind, oneself knowing oneself is necessary. So here Bhagavan clearly shows that happiness is our real nature. Because, why? Because we all want to be happy. We all have greatest love for ourselves. And what causes love is only happiness. So that means we are happiness. That's one reason. The other reason is in sleep, what we experience in sleep, which is a state devoid of mind and therefore devoid of all phenomena, what we experience is happiness. So happiness is our real nature. So, but that is what Bhagavan is arguing here. But he also implies, since happiness is alone is the cause of love, that is, we love what is happiness. So since happiness is our real nature, love for happiness is also our real nature. So happiness and love are our own real nature, just as consciousness is our own real nature. So what we actually are is Satchidananda. That is, Sat means what is, what exists, or being. Chit means awareness. In this context, it means pure awareness. Ananda means perfect happiness. Another term that is often used is Asti Bhati Priyam. Asti means being. Bhati means shining, that's awareness. Priyam means love. So love and happiness are our own real nature. So they are not just a product of evolution. Evolution applies only to, the scientific theory of evolution is applying to the evolution of physical matter. But if all this is just a dream, all our ideas of evolution, all our science is fine within a certain sphere. So long as this world seems to be real, the science seems to be real. But if this world is just a dream, as Bhagavan says it is, then all this science ultimately is meaningless. Science can tell us about the world. It cannot tell us about the reality, but it can tell us about the world appearance. It cannot tell us about the reality that lies behind this appearance. That reality is pure consciousness or awareness, which is infinite happiness and infinite love. So if you consider Bhagavan's teachings deeply, think deeply about Bhagavan's teachings and try to put them into practice, there'll be no room for the type of thoughts you describe here, Babak. We have no reason to believe or to suppose that what you've written here is true. In fact, we've got very strong reason to believe it's not true. Um, I'll just deal with one more question this time, and then we'll have we can have other people can ask questions. That is, John wrote, I would like to follow up on something you said at our last Saturday online meeting. The gist of it was that the self and the world necessarily exclude one another. If the self is present, then there is no world. If the world is being experienced, then there is no self-realization. If I have misinterpreted what you said, then apologies. But if, on the other hand, that is what you meant, then I have to respectfully express a different view, because it seems to me to be a dualistic interpretation. First, I accept that being without any experience of the world is possible. That is usually called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The self is aware of being and being aware, but there is a total absence of thought and sensation. It is simple, timeless, absolute peace. Although there is no world, there is no sense of any lack whatsoever. Secondly, when the world is seen, but not seen as separate, then self is not obscured. If a cloud is seen, I am that cloud. The true I am reaches everywhere. The world need not disappear in order for peace to be present. This is what is usually called Sahaja Samadhi, or the natural state. Sri Ramana said, what is Maya? It is only reality. Maya is used to signify the manifestation of the reality. Thus, Maya is only reality. What you have said is not actually, what you wrote in the first paragraph is not actually what I said. I didn't say that the self and the world necessarily exclude each other. What you mean by the self is our own real nature, which is pure awareness. That is the ultimate reality. There could be no appearance of a world if pure awareness were not present. I mean, if it was not on the basis of pure awareness. So they do not exclude one another. You then go on to say, if self is present, then there is no world. And if a world is being experienced, then there can be no self-realization. That isn't what I said. I didn't say if self is present, then there's no world. What I said is, if we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, we are not aware of any world. If we're aware of any world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Why is that? Because the world is an illusion that appears only in the view of ourself as ego. Only in waking and dream are we aware of any world. Because we rise as ego, we take ourselves to be a body, and we experience a world. There seems to be a world so long as we rise as ego. When we don't rise as ego, there is no world. The authority for what I said is, and Bhagavan has stated this very, very clearly, and he has implied it in many, many verses of Uludunaptu, but he's expressed it explicitly in the third and fourth paragraphs of Nana. In the third paragraph, what he says is, if the mind, which is the cause for all awareness and for all activity, here what he means by awareness is awareness of things other than ourselves. So if the mind, which is the cause for all awareness and all activity, ceases or subsides, Jagat Drishti, which means perception of the world, will depart. So that what he says here, if the mind ceases, perception of the world will depart. And then he says in the next sentence, just as unless awareness of the imaginary snake goes, awareness of the rope, which is the adhisthana, that's the basis or foundation, will not arise. That is, so long as we see the rope as a snake, we are not seeing it as a rope. When we see it as a rope, we are no longer seeing it as a snake. We can't see it as a rope and as a snake at the same time. Either we mistake it to be a snake, or we recognize that it's actually a rope. So long as we recognize it as a rope, we cannot mistake it to be a snake. So long as we mistake it to be a snake, we are not recognizing it as a rope. That's the analogy he gives. And he says, just like that, unless perception of the world, which is kalpita, that means a fabrication or imagination or mental creation, unless perception of the world departs, swarupa darshana, will not arise. And he says, Swarupa Darshana means seeing Swarupa, one's own real nature. And he says also, he describes one's own real nature, which is the adhisthana, which is the basis. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we are aware of ourselves as a body, we see the world. So long as we see the world, we are not seeing ourselves as we actually are. We are seeing ourselves only as a person within the world. So when we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, we will not be aware of the world. When we're aware of the world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. That's what Bhagavan clearly implies in that third paragraph. He goes on to say much the same thing in the fourth paragraph, but in a slightly different way. He begins by saying, what is called mind is an Adiseya Shakti, or extraordinary power, that exists in Atma-swarupa. That's one's own real nature. So mind is a power that exists in Atma-swarupa. It makes all thoughts appear. So here he's using mind in the sense of ego, because it's ego that projects all thoughts. Ego is the first thought, the root thought, the thought called I. It projects all other thoughts. When one looks, excluding or removing or putting aside all thoughts, solitarily there's no such thing as mind. Therefore, thought alone is the swarupa of the mind. That is the real nature, the actual nature of the mind is nothing but thought. And then he goes on to say, this is what is relevant to what you have written about. Excluding thoughts, there is not separately any such thing as world. So he's saying here, the world is nothing but thoughts. In sleep, there are no thoughts, and consequently, there is also no world. In waking and dream, there are thoughts, and consequently, there is also a world. So in other words, Bhagavan is saying the world is nothing but, what we see as a world is nothing but our own thoughts. It's our own, as he described in the previous paragraph, it's a karpana, that means a mental creation, just like the world we perceive in a dream. Then he, in the next sentence, he gives an analogy. Just as a spider spins out thread from within itself and again draws it back into itself, so the mind makes the world appear from within itself and again dissolves it back into itself. And then in the next sentence he says, when the mind comes out from Atma-swarupa, the world appears. So in other words, it's only when the mind arises that the world seems to exist. Therefore, when the world appears, Swarupa does not, Swarupa, one's own nature, does not appear. When Swarupa appears, and he puts in brackets prakashikam, which means shines, the world does not appear. What that means is, so long as we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, the world doesn't appear. And when we're aware of the world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So Bhagavan says it very, very explicitly here. And in the next paragraph, he explains it in a more subtle way. He says, remember that he said in that paragraph that the world is nothing but thoughts. Here he said, of all the thoughts that appear in the mind, the thought called I alone is the first thought. What he refers to the thought called I is ego. Only after this rises do other thoughts rise. That is, only after we rise as ego do all other thoughts arise. So the world that comes into existence only when we rise as ego, because the world is nothing but thoughts. Only after the first person appears do second and third persons appear. First person here means ego, or the first thought I. Second and third persons, it's all phenomena. So only after the first person appears do second and third persons appear. Without the first person, that's without ego, second and third persons do not exist. So no phenomena exist without ego, is the implication. So, and there are many, many verses of Uludnaptu that I could cite and explain to you, in which Bhagavan very, very clearly explains this. But the world, I mean, I can give one or two examples. In verse 6, Bhagavan says, the world is a form of 5 sense impressions, not anything else. In other words, the world is nothing but sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and tactile sensations. Apart from this, there's no such thing as world. The world as we know it is only these 5 kinds of sense impressions. So Bhagavan says the world is a form of five sense impression and not anything else. These five sense impressions are impressions to the five sense organs. That is through the five sense organs that we know these. Since the mind alone, or the one mind, perceives the world by way of the five sense organs, say, is there a world besides the mind? Here that's a rhetorical question. The obvious implication is there is no world besides the mind. And in the next sentence, in the next verse, verse 7, he uses the word arivu. Arivu means awareness, but here the awareness he's talking about is the mind, because he talks about the awareness rising and subsiding. What he says is, though the world and awareness arise and subside simultaneously, the world shines only by awareness. The awareness that arises and subsides is not the real awareness, the pure awareness. It's only the mind or ego, which is the awareness that arises and subsides. So though the world and awareness rise and subside simultaneously, the world shines by awareness. Awareness, as I say here, means ego or mind. What he means by saying the world shines by awareness, it is only in the view of ego that the world seems to exist. And then in the next sentence, he describes what is the reality. He doesn't refer to it as pure awareness, but it implies pure awareness. Only that which shines without appearing and disappearing, as the place for the appearing and disappearing of the world and awareness, is the substance, which is the whole. That substance is pure awareness, our fundamental awareness, I am. So it is the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am, never appears or disappears. It's always shining. And it is the base for the appearing and disappearing of the world and the mind. Bhagavan repeatedly emphasizes in so many ways that the world is nothing but thoughts, and it depends for its seeming existence only on the mind. Bhagavan also taught in so many, repeatedly emphasized that what we now take to be the waking state is only a dream. So a dream world seems to exist only so long as we're dreaming. So when we wake up from this dream, the dream world will come to an end. That's what we have to infer from when Bhagavan says that our waking state is nothing but a dream, and the world we see in it is no more real than the dream world we perceive in any other dream. So Bhagavan was very, very explicit on this. It doesn't mean that the self doesn't exist if the world is present. We're just not aware of ourselves as we actually are, so long as we're aware of the world. Because whenever we're aware of the world, we're aware of ourselves as a person within the world. So long as we mistake ourselves to be a person, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Ourself as we actually are is what Bhagavan means by Swarupa or Atma-swarupa, which is what you referred to here as the self. You say that it's dualistic, but it's actually dualistic to think that the world has any existence other than pure awareness. That is, what exists is, Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yathatamai uludu Atma-swarupa mondre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. Atma-swarupa means the real nature of ourself. The world, soul, and God are karpanika, that's fabrications or imaginations or mental creations in it, like the illusory silver in a shell. These three appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. Swarupa, one's own real nature, alone is the world. Swarupa alone is I, the ego. Swarupa alone is God. Everything is Shiva Swarupa. So that is if you have more than one thing, you have duality. But according to Bhagavan, what actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. So there is no world, there is no God, there is no soul, there is no God. All these things are mere fabrications. And in whose view do they appear? It's only in the view of ourself as ego that there seem to be all these differences. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa, which is pure awareness. you also say, I accept that being without any experience of the world is possible. This is usually called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Why do we have to bring Nirvikalpa Samadhi into the picture? Every day in sleep, we're experiencing a state in which there's no experience of the world. Why is there no world appearing in sleep? Because there's no ego there. So the world exists only in the view of ego. When we rise as ego in waking or dream, there seems to be a world. When we don't rise as ego in sleep, there's no world seems to exist. And regarding Sahaja Samadhi, what Bhagavan means by Sahaja Samadhi is our natural state. Our natural state is the state of pure awareness. Pure awareness is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. Sometimes Bhagavan said regarding Sahaja Samadhi, but in the view of the onlooker, it will seem that the jnani who is in Sahaja Samadhi will be aware of the world. But that's only in the view of the onlooker. Because we mistake Bhagavan to be a person, we think Bhagavan, as a person, he's aware of the world. When we ask questions, he answers questions. He goes to the kitchen, he cuts vegetables, he writes verses, he answers questions, all these things. It seems to us Bhagavan is aware of the world. But that is because we are not aware of Bhagavan as he actually is. We take that person to be Bhagavan. Whereas Bhagavan said, I am not this body. When he was asked what his real nature is, he wrote in a verse, Ariyati Tara Jivara Dahavari Jaguhail, Arivairami Paramatman Arunachala Ramanan. Arunachala Ramana is that which is joyfully shining as awareness in the hearts of all living beings, from Hari, from the highest God, down to the low, from all living beings, all sentient beings, beginning with Hari. Arunachala Ramana is that which is shining in their heart as awareness. So Bhagavan is not what he seems to be. He's not the person he seems to be. Because we mistake ourselves to be a body, we mistake him to be a body. But he's only aware of himself just as I am. He's not aware of any body or world or anything. And regarding the passage you referred to, you say Sri Ramana says, what is Maya? It's only reality. Maya is used to signify the manifestation of the reality. Thus, Maya is only reality. I found the passage you're referring to. It's in Talks. I think it's in section, is it this one? Second, yes, it's early on in Talks. It's in section 20 of Talks. It's when Mr. Evans Wentz was questioning Bhagavan, and one of the questions he asked, what does Maharshi think of the theory of the universal illusion, Maya? Bhagavan asks, what is Maya? It is only reality. And the devotee says, is not Maya illusion? And Bhagavan is recorded to have said, Maya is used to signify the manifestations of reality. Thus, Maya is only reality. I don't think this has been very clearly recorded, because the manifestations of the reality, I think the term manifestation, Bhagavan didn't refer to Maya as a manifestation. Maya is an appearance. So what Bhagavan means, the term, I don't think there's any Tamil term that I can think of that is the equivalent of manifestation. The reality doesn't manifest as such. Reality is what is ever shining in our heart as I. It doesn't need to manifest as the world or as Maya. Maya is a mere appearance. When Bhagavan says, what is Maya? It is only reality. That is like asking, what is the snake? It's only a rope. So the snake is a mere appearance in the rope. Just like that, Maya is a mere appearance in reality. What is real is only pure awareness. Maya, or that is the appearance of all manifestation, all multiplicity, is a mere appearance in that. So just like the snake is only a rope, Maya is only reality. That's the sense in which Bhagavan said it. So ultimately, there is no world, there is only reality. And one other point you say, second, when the world is seen, but is not seen as separate than self, is not seen as separate, then self is not obscured. But how can we see the world not as separate? The world is nothing but a multiplicity of forms. Each form is separate from each other form. And there's also, in order to see the world, the forms are all objects. To see, so there's the basic duality of subject and object. So long as there's a perceiver and things perceived, so long as there's a subject and object, there is duality. So when we see everything as ourself, what does that mean? That means we see only ourself and not everything. When we see the snake as a rope, we are not seeing the snake, we are seeing only the rope. So though sometimes it is said that Jnani sees the world as himself, that doesn't mean that he's seeing all the names and forms and thinking all these names and forms are myself. What it means is he's seeing only himself and not the world. Just like if you see the snake as a rope, that means you recognize that what may previously have been perceived as a snake is actually nothing but a rope. So when you see the snake as a rope, you're not seeing the snake at all, you're seeing only the rope. Likewise, when we see the whole world as ourself, we are not seeing the world, we are seeing only ourselves. I hope that is clear. The next question was Rati. You had a question?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you and namaskaram. Thank you very much for these wonderful sessions. They've done a lot to, I feel wonderful to be immersed in your teachings and your blog and everything you've said and your beautiful explanation of Satchitananda, and it's beautiful. But anyway, what I wanted to say is the last meeting when I came, it was wonderful because I asked you a question about, why is it I'm only partially surrendered? Why can't I seem to surrender completely? And now I find that whatever you said, I'm not even sure I was listening completely. In fact, I went back and listened to all the videos on YouTube to see if I could see your answer for that again. But whatever it was, I was just, what happened was, whatever you said to me, I now feel completely surrendered. I feel a wonderful lightness of being. I feel, wow, it's so light, so free, so free, such a great feeling. But do I know? How do I know I'm completely surrendered? That's the question.
If you were completely surrendered, you wouldn't be here to know it.
No, but that's not it. I'm here because I'm enjoying meeting all of you. There's a great enjoyment and a love for all of you, for everyone.
The state of complete surrender is the state in which we do not rise as ego. That is the state of pure being. So we are not in that state yet. In order to deepen our surrender, as Bhagavan said, ultimately we can give ourselves to God only by clinging firmly to Atma-vichara, by being so keenly self-attentive that we give not even the slightest room to the rising of any other thoughts. So long as any thoughts are rising, so long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, our surrender is not yet complete.
Okay, that answers it, yes.
Yeah. So we need to cling more and more firmly to self-attentiveness.
Yes, thoughts do arise, but they're thoughts to do with practical things, like how do I do this, how do I do that, how do I get this done, how do I get that done. There is no vichara about, oh, what will happen if this happens or that happens. Yeah. It's very much a life in the present moment, very much in the present. I don't live in the past. I don't worry about the future. I don't worry about COVID. Pre-COVID, pro-COVID. It's taken me 10 years to get to this point. I was on the path of Ramana from 2010 when my visit to Tiruvannamalai and doing the Girivalam with my brother completely transformed me. I mean, I felt eaten alive, just felt burnt alive by that hill and that going to the ashram and sitting there in meditation, going to Skandashram and sitting there in meditation whatever the energy was of that place, I just completely, I didn't want to leave. I just felt, please, let me just stay there, please. And even now I feel, let me just go back. Why am I here in California? Where do I be? But then I always remember what Ramana would himself say, where am I? Where am I? I'm here. I'm here. Which is to say that Trunamala is everywhere. It is in your heart. It is with you. It's in your heart. It's right here with me. Ramana is right here with me. And he emerges sometimes as the outer form, and sometimes he's my Sadguru. But he is with me. He's always with me. I feel his presence very strongly in my life. And it's just, it's so wonderful to feel that the greatest thing which I find I often do now is I tell myself, and I ask myself, well, what would Ramana say in this situation? Well, he'd say, Rati, mind your own business. So I just mind my own business. It's so simple. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you very much. Namaskaram.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned about thoughts, that is, the more deep we go in the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, the less thoughts will have emotional power. That is, thoughts are there. Naturally, when we are negotiating our way through this life, there are thoughts, but thoughts won't have so much impact on us. We'll be more and more indifferent to them. We become more and more indifferent to whatever happens. So the thoughts lose their emotional power, and thereby they reduce in strength. But we are still on the path. We still have to go deeper and deeper within. When we go sufficiently deeply within, even those thoughts will not arise. There will only be just pure self-attentiveness.
There is self-attentiveness. There is that pure self-attentiveness. Most of the time there is. And even when there are thoughts underlying that, I'm always aware of that blank screen of the self. So to that extent, I've reached that level, you might say, or whatever it is. And again, as Ramana would say, it's not like reaching the level. It's really like just knowing the nose that was always on your face. The nose was always there, but you were never aware of it. But the nose is there. And so you're always aware the self is there. The lovely Atma is always there, ever present to give you, to go back into that wonderful void, that complete Hiranyagarbha, that void, that beautiful void of, just nothingness is there. And that's wonderful. One always goes back into that, but one comes out. So in a sense, there's no out. I mean, I haven't made big changes in my life. There's still all the things, everything's there as is and all that. But inside me, I think I've changed so much so that none of this means anything to me. Tomorrow, I have to leave, take a backpack or take nothing and just leave out of my door and walk out. I can walk out. There's nothing. I'm not afraid. There's nothing it's done. It's done for me. It's all done, Yeah. I don't know if I'm dead or alive even, because I feel like pure spirit. I feel like, I'm just being. I don't know. It's like wake and sleep and dream and all this all just goes on. It's just like everything, one into the other. Who knows what is wake or dream?
This whole life is a passing show. And we should always have our bags packed and ready to go, metaphorically speaking.
Yes, my backpack is always ready to go.
Because
I even wonder, why am I attached to that backpack? Why? But like Ramana, let me take my walking stick if I need a walking stick. I don't need one yet, but but whatever it is, just go. Not even put on my slippers. Just leave. Leave. So yes, I'm ready. I'm ready for everything. Yeah. Ready for whatever it is that he has in mind for me, and whatever he has planned for me, it's ready. I'm waiting to hear, always from here, always listening, keeping my eyes and ears open for his messages. Messages from him are the most important messages to me. And my time spent in communion, because I live alone, my time spent in communion with him is the most precious. I say, wow, it's so good to be at peace. So good to be at peace. Feels so good. All the drama is gone, all the worries, all the lives and I know the children, the husbands, everything is there. All that was there in the past, whatever it is. When they emerge in the present, they're there as whatever that is. But it doesn't, it's just like what is me is already in Tirunamalai. Tirunamalai is right here for me, in my heart, always in my heart, ever present. You know, that's what I feel. So that's all I can say. And thank you, Namaskaram, Michael J.
Namaskaram to Bhagavan.
Thank you.
Saravana Bhavan, you want to ask now?
Michael J. I have got a couple of questions. One is regarding Atma-vichara, and one may be a little an Atma-vichara. The first one I will ask about the Atma-vichara questions. So, do our real nature or the pure I, Bhagavan, has got any concern about our ego, especially in the aspect of waking up us from our dreams? Or we have to try with our free will to achieve this? That is my first question.
Yes and no is the answer. Truly speaking, our real nature, which is pure awareness, is not aware of any ego. So it is just as it is. However, our real nature is infinite love. And as we really are, what we really love is just to be as we are, because being as we are is being happy. So our real nature, because it loves us as itself, it loves us to be happy. So from our perspective, it seems that that love that our real nature has for us as itself is what we experience as grace. So that power of grace is very real, and that power of grace is helping us. But that power of grace is the power of love. There's no doing involved in grace. Grace is just being. But by the power of being, by the power of love, it is drawing us back to itself. So we cannot conceive this adequately with our mind, because our mind can only think in dualistic terms. But that infinite love that Bhagavan has for us as himself, that is what is working and drawing us along this path of self-investigation and self-surrender.
Thank you very much. That other question is regarding the previous devotees' questions about the world. So I just want to ask, is everyone seeing the same world or different world? If they are seeing different world, among those, what features are in common? Okay, another one is, who project the world to surveillance camera?
Okay. In a dream, you see yourself as a person in the dream, and you see many other people, and you believe that you, the person in the dream, are seeing the world, and you believe all those other people are seeing the world. But what is actually seeing the world is none of the other people are seeing the world. Even the person you seem to be is not seeing the world. You are seeing yourself as that person, and you are seeing the world. In a dream, there is only one dreamer, and only the dreamer is seeing the dream world. According to Bhagavan, our present state is just a dream. So there is only one dreamer. So the one who is seeing the world is the dreamer. That one who is seeing the world sees itself as if it's a person. Now you're aware of yourself as, I am Saravana Bhavan. So it seems to you that as Saravana Bhavan, you are seeing the world. But Saravana Bhavan is the name of a body. That body is Jada. The mind operating that body is Jada. It's only you, the ego, who see yourself as this body of mind and say, I am Saravana Bhavan, and as Saravana Bhavan, I am seeing the world. And you see many other people just like you, and that you think they're also seeing the world, just like you. But actually,
Yes.
it's all in your view.
Yeah, in my questions, are we seeing the same world? Like me, I am seeing the world as
in your
you are
dream,
seeing the same.
in your dream, are the people in your dream seeing the same world as you're seeing?
Yes.
It seems so. But when you wake up, do you think those people are still seeing that world?
No, everything is disappeared. But now in the daydream, vacant.
Okay, before they disappeared, were those people actually seeing the world?
No, there's no, even there's no people. That is my projection, my mental projection.
Yeah. So if our present state, so then extrapolate. If our present state is just a dream, as Bhagavan says, how many perceivers are there in this world?
All living organism or living beings are.
But if this
here
is
in
just
the
a dream, then all those living organisms are just your part of your dream.
That is only myself. There's no, I have projected, but here there
Are you ready to accept what Bhagavan says, that this world is just a dream?
because this is a confusing subject for most of us.
Because
So
it's not actually, it's very, very simple. Why it seems confusing is we are unwilling to accept that this is just a dream. If we were willing to accept that this is just a dream, then it's extremely simple. Bhagavan's teaching, this applies not only to this aspect of Bhagavan's teaching, the whole of Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple. What makes them seem difficult, what makes them seem confusing, is that we are not willing to let go of all our former beliefs. We are still clinging to our belief that the world is actually there, but we're actually, all the other people in this world are perceiving the world just as we are. This is not, though we may say, oh yes, this is just a dream, but we're not really accepting that it's a dream. If we were really accepting it was a dream, this question wouldn't arise.
yeah, because it's little difficult for me to accept. That's what I am asking this
Right,
question.
right. That is our unwillingness. How can we surrender ourselves when we are not even willing to surrender all our old beliefs? So this is why the spiritual path is necessary. We're on this spiritual path in order to learn to let go. Ultimately, we have to learn to let go of ego. But in order to let go of ego, we first have to be willing at least to let go of all our old beliefs, our desires, our attachments, all these things. That is why the spiritual path is a gradual path. Because we have so much attachment, we're so strongly bound to this state. Why? Because we're not willing to let go. So the whole of the spiritual path is learning to be willing to let go. And we will become willing to let go only to the extent that we put into practice what Bhagavan has taught us.
Yeah, it is too much for my capacity, mental capacity to understand. But what I am
it is not beyond your mental capacity. It is very, very simple. That's what I say, it's our unwillingness to accept. We are not willing to let go of all our old ideas. We cannot reconcile what Bhagavan has taught us with our old ideas. Either we have to accept what Bhagavan taught us and reject all our old ideas, or if we want to cling to our old ideas, we cannot accept what Bhagavan has taught us. So we have to choose. Are we willing to accept what Bhagavan taught us?
No, I want to accept the first teaching, that who am I?
Right, okay, that's a step.
And then if we are in a Bhagavan position, then we can understand what is the next step.
Yes.
Until that, my understanding, we are having different world. Everyone have got their own world. Now I am in New Zealand. That New Zealand looks like for you, it is a great country. But for me, there are a lot of demons in the human form, including in parliament or in the court and everywhere. So we are projecting own world in our mind. That world we will pull it in when we are sleeping. That is like a spider web. That is I can accept. But then there's no world. That is, if I am in a bhagavan position, if I come, I can explain to others. Otherwise, when people are asking, it's a little bit difficult for me. That's what I need your clarification.
That is why, because people weren't willing to accept his deeper teachings, Bhagavan often had to dilute his teachings a little to make them more palatable to people, to make it easier for people to accept. But if we are serious about following what Bhagavan has taught us, we have to be willing to accept what he taught us. If we have difficulty accepting it, doesn't matter. But slowly, we need to be moving in that direction. Slowly, our aim should be to be willing to wholeheartedly accept what Bhagavan taught us. Because only to the extent that we are willing to accept what he taught us, will we be able to go deep in the practice.
Yes, I have fully surrendered to Bhagavan, as well as Bhagavan said to...
If you had fully surrendered to Bhagavan, you wouldn't be having any problems. You wouldn't be asking any questions.
But he also said that we have got the rights to understand whether it is correct or wrong. Yeah. He didn't say that you have to believe whatever he is saying, everything, no? That also one statement.
There is one statement, but you can be guaranteed that it's a false statement. If anyone says, I am fully surrendered to Bhagavan, that cannot be true. Because if we are fully surrendered to Bhagavan, there'll be no I to say, I have fully surrendered to Bhagavan.
Yes, that's true. I'm trying to.
we are exposing our lack of surrender by saying, I have fully surrendered.
No, sorry for that. I'm trying to do that.
We're all in the same position. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying we would all like to fully surrender.
Yeah.
But we haven't surrendered yet because we still aren't ready to let go of all our desires, attachments. Why we have difficulty accepting that this world is just a dream? Because we've got so much attachment to this world.
Because if you consider that this is our mental projection, how you will explain a psychiatric patient? He is projecting hallucination, auditory, visual hallucination, that is in the second stage.
It is not.
So he has the 3 stages.
It's your projection.
No, he has got a dream stage, sleeping stage, waking stage, and the hallucination stage.
He is part of your projection. Don't worry about him. If you ask about someone else, that's, as you said, that's an Atma-vichara. Ask about yourself. You have projected it.
Doing an Atma-vichara. Now I just want to get some clarification. That's all. Right. Yeah.
Okay. In a dream, we see all sorts of people. We see good people, we see bad people, we see mad people, we see sane people, all sorts of people. But they're all our own mental projection.
I never seen any mad people in dream. So
well, you're lucky then.
Outside we are seeing.
Your present state is a dream. So if you see a mad person now, you're seeing a mad person in a dream.
I don't know. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay. And then Jennifer. Jennifer, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for all these questions. I think the thing that I'm thinking about is, if we're in a dream, we're living this dream, but like following Bhagavan's will in this dream, like, how do we know, like, because I find fear or resentments or addictive kind of behaviors, they affect me, and I'm trying to follow Bhagavan, I know this is a dream, but I mean, I know it, but I forget, I don't really know it. I'm so glad the other person asked that question. Oh, now there's a phone call in my dream. So anyway, just because I find that I feel like, especially fear, it gets in the way of just living as I like, just, or do I just not worry about all this? But I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly, but just outwardly living in the world. Like I want to just be inward and follow Bhagavan, but living in the world requires, you know, discernment. And anyway, I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on that. Hopefully
Okay.
that makes some sense.
You mentioned Bhagavan's will. What is Bhagavan's will? Bhagavan wants only one thing. He wants us to be happy. So if we are happy, we are following Bhagavan's will. If we are unhappy, we are not following Bhagavan's will. So we can be happy only to the extent to which we surrender ourselves to him. Just like desires and attachments are obstacles on this path, fears are also obstacles. Because fear, why we fear anything? Because if we have something that we value, we fear to lose it. But one thing we all fear to lose is our life, because we value this life in this body so much, because we take this body to be ourselves. So we all fear death. We may put the thought of death out of our mind, but that fear of death is there in seed form in all of us. And like that, we have so many other fears. Whatever we desire, we fear its opposite. So if for example, if I desire to be rich, I will fear to be poor. If I desire to be healthy, I will fear sickness. If I desire to be seen by everyone as a very smart and intelligent person, I will be feared to be seen as a stupid person. So fear is just the flip side of love, of desire. So when we experience fears, these fears are an indication of our desires and attachments. They expose the extent to which we still have desires and attachments. So just like we need to give up our desires and attachments, we also need to give up our fears. But we cannot give up the fears without giving up the desires and attachments, because as I say, the fears are just the flip side of the desires and attachments. So how to give up our desires and attachments? We cannot do so overnight. It's a gradual process. Slowly, we need to wean our mind off its desires and attachments. We do so by following Bhagavan's path, by gradually trying to turn our attention within, trying to let go of other things. So if we are trying our best to follow Bhagavan's teachings, that's all that matters. The desires, the attachments, the fears, they will all gradually drop off in due course. Does that help to answer your question at all?
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
We have to be very patient on this path, because, as I say, we can't bring about these changes overnight. It takes time. It takes time to wean our mind off its desires, attachments, fears, and so on. That's what the spiritual path is all about.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ash, you wanted to ask a question? Okay. Sorry, I see what Ash has asked is, my mic is not working, so using chat. All living things need sustenance to exist. Even plant sources are alive, so it's okay to eat them, as they are a lower form of life and not considered to be conscious. Also, even when consuming plant sources, we need to select the least harmful part, for example, the fruit that is produced by the plant to reproduce itself, but not harm the seed nut. Did Bhagavan have any thoughts on this? Yeah, all animals ultimately depend on plants. I mean, in a biological sense, or even the meat-eating animals, they eat animals but eat plants. So ultimately, there would be no animals. We are an animal. We and other animals could not exist without plants. So we do have to eat plants. As you say, the plants produce fruit for their reproduction. So fruit are designed to be eaten so that we can spread their seeds. So yeah, in a sense, we can say the most sattvic of all foods is fruit. But we also know from experience that we need, if we're eating a plant diet, we need a variety of different plants, fruits, vegetables, grains, and so on. So we just have to be practical about these things. So long as we are we cannot live a life of perfect ahimsa. The himsa means harm. Ahimsa means not harming. We can minimize the harm we cause, but we cannot totally avoid harm, because what is the first himsa, the first harm, is our rising as ego. All other harms result from our rising as ego. So our aim should be to put an end to the rising of ego. If we want to live a life of perfect ahimsa, we need to cease rising as ego. I hope that answers your question. You asked, did Bhagavan have any thoughts on this? I don't know if Bhagavan said anything particular on this, but Bhagavan obviously did recommend a plant-based diet. I mean, he exemplified that. And when he talked about sattvic diet, he was talking mainly about plants. So a plant-based diet. So that's the appropriate diet for us if we are following the spiritual path. But as I say, our aim should be the whole purpose of this is our ultimate aim is to cease rising as ego, because then only can we be in a state of perfect ahimsa. So I hope that, okay, yes, you now I see you say thanks, Michael, that's good. So I hope that yeah, I hope that was sufficient. And then Kartik, you had a question. You've got your hand raised. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, Michael. Thank you so much for all the answers that you have given from my questions and all other questions. I think it's extremely helpful in understanding and comprehending the teachings of Bhagavan. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry. Yeah.
I can hear you.
So my question is kind of a follow-up question regarding the answers that you have given. You have mentioned that in order to truly surrender, you have mentioned that everything happening is according to our hours, prarabdha.
Yes.
Which if that is the case, then for example, if I'm whether I follow ahimsa or not, is it also driven by prarabdha, or do I have any free will at all?
Prarabdha determines what happens to us. Because certain of the actions of our body, speech, and mind are driven by prarabdha, but not all our actions, because we are free to act according to our will. For example, it may not be our destiny to have a certain experience, but we can want to experience that. We can try to experience it. But if it's not our destiny, however much we try, we're not going to be able to experience it. So the will and destiny both are driving our actions. Our aim should be to avoid rising as ego, and thereby avoid having likes, dislikes, desires, attachments. In other words, we want to make our will inoperative. By just being as we actually are, our will is no longer driving us to act by body, speech, or mind. So we need to keep a curb on our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. Generally, actions that involve harm are generally driven by our desires. If we had no selfish desires, we would not cause harm to others. But to the extent that we free ourselves from our desires, to that extent will we have love and compassion for others. So we will not knowingly harm others. But sometimes unknowingly we may harm. Sometimes accidents occur. We may sometimes cause harm to others. Walking along, we may not notice that there's an ant on the path and we may tread on it. That's obviously not intentional harm, but that's what I said. We cannot be totally free of himsa so long as we rise as ego, but we should avoid knowingly or willingly causing harm to others as much as possible. That is, we need to curb those desires that will make us inclined to cause harm to others.
Thank you, Michael. I think that answers my question. Thank you.
And then Prasant.
Namaskaram,
Namaskar.
Michael Baba. Thank you for all the question answers and the interactions. We were quite interested in the earlier conversation about fear.
Yes.
Could you just help us expound a bit more on the various fears and how a part of surrender can help us or guide us out of fear, of various paranoias, fear of failure, fear of, that was quite enlightening. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned one fear of failure. Why we fear failure is because we desire success. If we had no desire for success, we would have no fear of failure. So at the heart of every fear is a desire. So in order to free our mind from fears, we need to free our mind from desires. And the way to free our mind from desires, the most effective way, is the path that Bhagavan has shown us, the path of self-investigation and self-surrender. Because every time we try to turn our attention within, we are, that is, all desires, fears, attachments, and so on, they're drawing our attention outwards. So by choosing to turn within, we are weakening, gradually weakening those vasanas that draw us to go outwards, of Vishaya vasanas. And the Vishaya vasanas are desires, fears, and so on in seed form. They are the seeds that give rise to desires and fears. So to reduce the strength of our Vishaya vasanas, the most effective way is to follow the path that Bhagavan has shown us of turning our attention within. You mentioned about kinds of desires. There is many kinds of fear. There is many kinds of fear as there are kinds of desire. But the different kinds don't matter. It's because we have desire for different objects, that is, the different kinds of desires are desires for different kinds of things. But desiring anything other than ourselves, desiring anything other than just to be as we actually are, is drawing our mind away from ourselves. So what all desires have in common is they draw our attention away from ourselves. Except for one desire, the desire to turn back within. That is the only desire we should encourage.
Baba, if the fear is for some person or on some person, like I fear person X,
Yeah.
He or she might harm me,
Right.
what would be the ideal course? Maybe because of my early interactions or my, for whatever reasons, I haven't developed any deep fear.
Okay, that a person can harm you only if they can, only by stopping you experiencing what you want to experience. Supposing you want a nice, calm, peaceful life, and there's someone who's always creating problems in your life, naturally you fear that person because you don't want to get involved in arguments and in quarrels and things, but that person is always coming and troubling you and involving you in quarrels and things. Naturally you will fear that person. But how to deal with that fear, we need to be indifferent. Okay, if I would like to live a peaceful life, but if troubles are to come to me, that's also, let's take that as Bhagavan's will. Let me accept it wholeheartedly. But I should have people in my life who are constantly disturbing my peace. Because the peace we need to seek is not the peace in our outward life, it's the inward peace. That peace, the true peace, can be found only in our heart. If we find peace in our heart, nothing that happens in the external world will disturb us. So then we won't fear any person, because no person will be able to do anything that will disturb our inner peace. So the answer to all problems is turning within. Bhagavan has given us a medicine which is literally, it's a cure-all. It will cure all problems because it deals with the root of all problems, which is ego. We solve the problem of ego, all problems are solved in one fell swoop.
Yeah, true. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Baba.
Baba. Thank you.
Girish? Girish?
Hi, James.
Hi.
I have these issues in my house. Has Bhagavan talked about Dark Forces and Tantra?
Sorry?
Has Bhagavan talked about Dark Forces and Tantra? I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask you, but
I don't know. No doubt Bhagavan would have said something about this, but not everything that Bhagavan has said has been recorded. And generally, Bhagavan, whatever Bhagavan says, is in answer to some question. So people may have asked Bhagavan about these things. Ultimately, we don't have to fear dark forces and Tantra and everything. Whatever happens is happening according to prarabdha. Prarabdha is what has been ordained by Bhagavan for our own spiritual good. So if we're on this path of surrender, we should be different to all these things. There may be dark forces. It may be possible for people to do Tantra to cause harm to others. It may seem that may seem to be the case, but they cannot actually cause any harm to you, but it's not already in your prarabdha. So we don't have to fear anything. The only thing we need to fear is not surrendering to Bhagavan, because if we don't surrender to Bhagavan, we face all difficulties. If we surrender to him, nothing that happens to us can affect us.
But the problem is surrendering takes time. You're not able to surrender completely. Then what happens? And then issues in life. I mean, people are doing say black magic,
Yeah.
and then you start having problems in life. And then they first you think they don't affect you, but then suddenly the problems become serious around you. Then what you begin to wonder. You don't want to give such people strength, Okay. But then you begin to wonder.
Okay, those problems that you face in your life, they're according to your destiny. Mm-hmm. They may seem to be caused by black magic, but that black magic is also according to your destiny. So let's not give reality to these things. The nature of life is good things happen, things that we consider good and things that we consider bad, both happen in our life. No one has an entirely peaceful life, a trouble-free life. It's just not the nature of life. Taking your body as I is inviting trouble, because as a body, we undergo all sorts of difficulties. And so we shouldn't expect our life to be free of troubles. Whatever troubles come in our life, they cannot come without Bhagavan allowing them to come in our life. So whatever happens, we should accept it as Bhagavan's will. So it's better not to think in terms of black magic and all these things. Whether these things are true or not doesn't matter. Nothing is happening. Whatever happens is happening by Bhagavan's, with the consent of Bhagavan's grace. So Bhagavan allows certain things to happen, allows us to undergo certain experiences for our own good. So if you feel that someone is doing black magic against you and causing trouble in your life, that is an opportunity for you to surrender yourself more to Bhagavan. So say thank you to the black magician for making you surrender more to Bhagavan.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Very good one. Thank you very much.
Right. Everything, Bhagavan used to say, who are our real friends in the world? Our best friends are those we take to be our enemies. Because they are enemy of whom? They're enemy of the ego. But who is our enemy? So our best friends are the so-called enemies. And our worst enemies are those who flatter us, those who are very kind to us and everything. They're our real enemies. Because the actual enemy is only ego. So anyone who bolsters our ego is against us. Anyone who puts our ego down is for us. Good for us.
So again, thank you so much, Michael. And we very much appreciate all that you've been doing for us. And I hope you're well.
All thanks to Bhagavan. All thanks to Bhagavan. I'm not doing anything. If anything useful is done seemingly by me, it's actually done by Bhagavan.
Yes, yes, thank you.
As ego, I'm only creating trouble, not doing any good.